In 2000, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service did a study that showed there were approximately 1,230 endangered animal species in North America.
Every minute, thousands of wild animals die, some due to natural causes and some because of human faults.
So in 2005, the United States government passed a bill called the State Wildlife Grant Program.
This bill created an opportunity for each of the 50 states to receive hundreds of thousands of dollars in aid from the federal government to go towards protecting wildlife and their habitats.
All the states needed to do was come up with a wildlife action plan by October of 2005 that met all the requirements provided by the bill.
Every single state signed up for this, including our state of Rhode Island.
The Wildlife Action Plan is if you'll pardon the pun, a congressional animal. So it has 8 elements that have to be fulfilled. The first 4 are kind of the meat and potatoes of the document, which is the condition of the state's wildlife species. You know, what we have, what condition is it in, how is it doing. The second is habitats for those species, same thing. What do we have? What is the condition of it? The third is threats to those species and habitats, and the fourth is actions to abate those threats to species and habitats. And the other ones are things like monitoring.
One of the many requirements in the bill is for a revision to be made to the original action plan every 10 years. Seeing as 2005 was the year that the bill was passed and the action plans were approved, that makes 2015 the final due date for any revisions being made. A revision to the bill has been made that in the action plan revisions, if it isn't already mentioned, the states must address climate change.
Climate change, if I'm not mistaken, was definitely part of the 2005 plan. It's a much bigger part of the 2015 plan. And in the revisions, it's been mandated that climate change be addressed by every state. So if it wasn't addressed in 2005 by a state, it has to be this year regardless.
The reason for the increase in attention towards climate change is that rising levels of carbon dioxide contribute to the greenhouse effect, which in turn warms the planet and can disrupt a species' ability to survive.
I rise today as a member of the Safe Climate Caucus to urge this do-nothing Congress to acknowledge the dangers and the reality of climate change. This week we got startling news that once again is falling on deaf ears here in the House of Representatives. The World Meteorological Organization announced that atmospheric carbon levels reached a record high in 2013. And the Audubon Society found that nearly half of all bird species in North America are at risk of severe population decline due to climate change.
The purpose of wildlife action plans is to avoid destruction of natural wildlife habitats, to preserve endangered aquatic and terrestrial species, to care for injured animals, to create awareness of the danger animals are in, and to bring local and state wildlife agencies together for the common good of the animals.
According to the Comprehensive Wildlife Conservation Strategy, or CWCS, the most prominent threats to these animals are the eradication of habitats as a result of deforestation or drought ensued from climate change and pollution of the air, water, and land.
Although wildlife action plans have been quite effective so far, each year Congress provides less and less money to the states.
Rhode Island gets an appropriation from the federal government, from Congress each year, and it started in 2002, and it started out at $776,000, and it's gradually gone down since then, but it's been $500,000 or $600,000 over the years. We're down to $468,000 as of last year, and Rhode Island obligates all of that money into a variety of grants that we use for state wildlife grant planning and other implementation grants.
The little funding that we do receive from the State Wildlife Grant Program not only works towards protecting the species, but the habitats of the species.
One way to preserve the habitats of species is by redeveloping the lost habitats. For example, by planting tall eel grasses in the ocean to provide shelter for the aquatic life.
There is a lot of work done to look at the building up sand and berms, actually using sand from the Outer Continental Shelf to make those habitats more resilient.
Another way of preserving habitats is by eliminating the invasive and non-native species that have taken over the land and water.
The sudden appearance of invasive or non-native species in the U.S. is generally caused by people bringing them from other countries because of their beauty. They may behave positively in a habitat for a certain time, but eventually become destructive.
There are plenty of animals. There are aquatic species, plants and animals, and there are land species, plants and animals. that are really wreaking a lot of havoc, and they come here a lot of different ways. Most of the invasive species we have, we didn't know they were going to become invasive. We just thought we brought them over because we thought they were pretty, or they were good at erosion control, things like that. And then all of a sudden, sometimes 100 or more years later, we realize, okay, well now it's really taking off and taking off.
In order to counteract the abundance of invasive species, it is encouraged to create more habitable lawns by planting domestic plants that provide shelter to the animals.
The idea that everyone needs to have this lawn that looks like a golf course, and it's this monoculture of a non-native, cut-to-the-quick grass species, that's really not providing anything. One of the big trends, I don't know if it's a trend yet, but I hope it becomes a really big trend. But if you have a large yard, to try to allocate some of that for wildlife, to make a conscious decision that this is what I actually want for a lawn, and the rest to be wildlife, to be native species, to be habitat.
We visited Satchwist Point National Wildlife Refuge to get a better understanding about the most endangered habitats in Rhode Island and the specific invasive species affecting them.
Satchwist Point National Wildlife Refuge is located on 2nd Beach in Middletown, Rhode Island.
This gives it immediate access to a popular destination for wildlife due to the many rocks and grasses lining the shore.
Wildlife rehabilitation centers function not only as refuges for endangered or injured species, but as information centers to educate the public about the harmful effects our ignorance has on the environment and the species that inhabit it.
By volunteering